A very good afternoon and welcome to The Ambassador, where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. I am your Ambassador Susan Nganga. To begin a bulletin, in recent years, the rise of jihadist groups across Africa has left a trail of destruction with devastating attacks in countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, and Mozambique. As militants align with global terror networks, thousands of innocent civilians have been displaced, their lives uprooted. This will be our focus today at the African In-Depth segment later on in the bulletin. But first, let's take a look at top stories making headlines. At least 30 people have died in catastrophic flooding in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, after heavy rains caused the Njili River to overflow. The floods have left several neighborhoods without power and water. Authorities are working to repair the damage with promises to restore essential services within the next few days.
At least 30 people have died in severe flooding in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, after heavy rains caused the Njili River to overflow its banks. The flooding led to the collapse of homes, with many residents unable to escape in time, resulting in a tragic loss of life, while others were forced to seek refuge on the roofs of their houses as the water continued to rise. With the roads impassable and electricity cut off in many areas, the situation grew increasingly dire. Residents expressed their grief and disbelief, unable to understand how such a catastrophe could strike their community.
It is really strange what's going on. We don't understand what's happening to bring us to this level. I am in tears because I've never seen such a catastrophe. God help us.
It's really sad what's happening. We've lost a lot. There are shops completely damaged. There are destroyed vehicles. Houses have collapsed. People are dead. Others are trapped. Some people have even taken refuge on the roofs of their houses.
The rains were worsened by poorly maintained drainage systems that couldn't handle the overwhelming water. Authorities are still assessing the damage, but the death toll is expected to rise as flooding waters recede, with fears that more bodies will be discovered in the submerged areas.
We can't make an exact assessment right now, because as you can see, looking at the water level, it is likely that when the water goes down, we'll also find dead bodies inside.
As the city deals with the aftermath, there are growing calls for improved flood management and infrastructure to prevent such tragedies in the future. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has issued a warning about the persistent violence in North and South Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which continues to result in civilian deaths, injuries, and displacements.
The ongoing conflict between local armed groups and M23 rebels continues to result in loss of life, injuries, and displacement among the local population. Meanwhile, the southern province of Tanganyika poses a serious threat to thousands. Intense clashes between local armed groups and M23 rebels were reported on Thursday in the town of Masisi Center in North Kivu. As of Wednesday, 9 out of the 11 health zones in the province have been affected, with over 1,450 confirmed cases and 27 reported since January, a shocking six-fold increase compared to the same period last year. UN health partners emphasized the urgent need for access to safe drinking water, noting that less than 20% of the affected areas have adequate coverage, coupled with insufficient healthcare resources to effectively address the growing number of cases. This is Jeff Aboki, GBS TV News.
After months of strained relations, France and Algeria have resumed diplomatic talks aimed at mending their ties. The talks comes after a series of disputes, including France's controversial support for the autonomy plan for Western Sahara, which angered Algeria and led to significant decline in trade and halted security cooperation. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot emphasized the importance of renewed cooperation for the benefit of both nations, particularly given their deep historic and cultural connections. This marks a crucial step towards rebuilding vital relations and addressing shared challenges like regional instability and terrorism.
France and Algeria have resumed diplomatic talks to mend strained relations after months of tension. The dispute escalated last year when French President Emmanuel Macron supported an autonomy plan for Western Sahara, therefore angering Algeria. This led to a 30% drop in trade and a halt in security cooperation, including efforts against Islamist militants. France has accused Algeria of trying to eliminate its economic presence, further damaging ties. However, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot emphasized the importance of renewing cooperation for the benefit of both nations, noting the deep historical and cultural connections between them. The French Foreign Minister visited Algeria yesterday to mark a first step toward rebuilding these vital relations, with both sides recognizing the need for collaboration in facing shared challenges like regional instability and terrorism. Elvin Muyodi, GBS News.
Supporters of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro gathered in Sao Paulo to rally behind him as he faces a Supreme Court trial over alleged attempts to overthrow the government following his 2022 election defeat. The demonstration, which also called for amnesty for those involved in the January 8th storming of government buildings, comes as Bolsonaro faces significant legal challenges, including the possibility of prison time if convicted.
Supporters of former Brazilian President Bolsonaro gathered in Sao Paulo to demonstrate their backing following a decision by Brazil's Supreme Court to put him on trial for allegedly conspiring to overthrow the government after his loss in the 2022 election. The charges stem from Bolsonaro's involvement in the January 8, 2023 storming of key government buildings in Brazil, an incident that federal police have linked to an attempted coup. At the rally, Bolsonaro supporters called for amnesty for those convicted of participation in the riots, a message echoed by former president himself. He expressed confidence in a bill that seeks to grant a pardon for those involved, suggesting it has enough votes to pass in the lower house of Congress.
They think that I will give up, that I will escape. They are mistaken. I made a vow and I will fulfill it, to defend my country regardless of the same sacrifice of my life. What the scoundrels want is not to arrest me truly. They want to kill because I am a thorn in their throat. Give me 50% of the House and 50% of the Senate and I will change Brazil's destiny.
Alongside his trial for the coup attempt, Bolsonaro has already been banned from holding public office until 2030 by Brazil's top electoral court due to his efforts to undermine the credibility of the country's voting system. If found guilty, Bolsonaro could face a lengthy prison sentence, marking a significant turning point in Brazil's ongoing political and legal battles. Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
The ambassador will take a short break. We'll be back with even more.
Anza wiki yako kwa njia sahihi kwa GBS Jumatatu.
Niko nawe hadi mida ya saa 4 asubuhi. Kwanza niseme asante kwa kuzidi kufuatilia na kutazama vipindi vyetu ambavyo huwa tunakuandalia hapa ndani ya GBS TV Jumatatu. People are now seeing the money that have been given to church as a bribe.
Jiunge nasi kila Jumatatu asubuhi kuanzia saa 1:30.
Nimesikia mwenzangu akifanya hesabu hapo ya vile ambavyo miungano zitakuwa. Ruto is going to fail whether with Raila or without Raila.
Kuna mahali anakosea akisema ati Raila na Ruto wataungana. Hakuna kuungana iko hapo, ndugu yangu, aje nikwambie ukweli.
Hadithi za kunoga.
Ukiangalia Wakenya, wananchi wa Kenya, pia hao maisha yao imedhulumiwa kwa kuongezwa kwa taxes, ziko very high taxes. So the statement by Rigathi Gachagua is just statement ya kumcheck that we can see you we can see between the lines.
Na mazungumzo yenye nguvu ya kukuletea utulivu kwa wiki yako.
ati Raila ataingia UDA.
Hiyo ni ndoto. Mimi yote nasema
hawezi, sababu
nasema hivi mheshimiwa, ikiwa Raila
itakuwa, mimi naona itakuwa
hadi saa 4 za asubuhi kwa majadiliano ya kusisimua.
Mheshimiwa Rais William Samoei Ruto ajue ya kwamba sasa yeye ni president wa Kenya. Sio mambo ya kufanyia wana Kenya mzaha. Kupoteza biashara kwa siku moja katika CPD, nafikiria ni jambo ambalo ni rahisi.
Usikose, ingia kwenye GPS TV. Anza Jumatatu yako kwa kusudi.
if the government does not spend, my brother, hakuna maendeleo inaonekana, hakuna barabara zinatengenezwa, hakuna dawa kwa hospitali, my friend, economies will not grow.
Tuonane panapo majaliwa yake Mwenyezi Mungu.
GPS Jumatatu, palipo mjadala wa leo na mwelekeo wa kesho.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent.
Kudiscover. Ulijuangaje like unaweza imba, like
Kini Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wanani dis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafanjo wananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu manze walishachoka na nikozabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya kalki.
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics?
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm trying to boss, let me do my thing. And if you're trying to win, you can be on my team. So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm trying to boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who will you choose?
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to the bulletin now. Pope Francis has made his first public appearance as he attended a mass at St. Peter's Square, the Vatican City in Rome, Italy, since he was discharged from the hospital a fortnight ago. Here is more from the Vatican City.
It was a surprise visit by Pope Francis yesterday at St. Peter's Square at the Vatican City ever since he left hospital on March 23rd. The large crowd in a mass at the St. Peter's Square was surprised with the pontiff's appearance in public since he was discharged from the Rome's Gemelli Hospital, where he had been admitted since February 14th when he critically fell ill, suffering from respiratory infection, later being diagnosed with double pneumonia. The crowd went wild as they celebrated the Pope, who was rolled past them on a wheelchair as he blessed them, wishing them a happy Sunday. According to the Vatican press, the Pope is improving and receiving physical and respiratory therapy, as well as therapy to work on his voice. Doctors have said he still needs a rest. Victor Jung, the ambassador.
Thank you, Victor, for that report in the Vatican City. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump warned foreign governments they will have to pay a lot of money to lift sweeping tariffs, characterizing duties as medicine and delivering more pain for global financial markets. Asian equity markets sank across the board and oil prices plummeted as investors feared that duties unveiled last week could lead to higher prices, weaker demand, and potentially a global recession. China's sovereign fund is stepping in to try and stabilize the market. Shares in Taiwan, meanwhile, plummeted almost 10%, the biggest percentage fall on record, and stock futures pointed to another brutal day for markets in Europe. The United States President Donald Trump indicated he was not concerned about losses that have wiped out trillions of dollars in value from world stock markets. Billionaire fund manager Bill, who endorsed Donald Trump's run for president, said the U.S. leader was losing the confidence of business leaders and should pause his trade war.
Sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. They are coming to the table, they want to talk, but there's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis.
Ukrainians are mourning the tragic loss of at least 19 people, including 9 children, following deadly Russian missile and drone strikes. The attacks have left the community devastated, with many residents calling for justice and accountability for the senseless violence. Local officials confirmed the fatalities, and the Ukrainian military swiftly condemned Russia's claim that the strikes were aimed at military targets. Here's more on that scene.
The missile attack, which struck a residential area in Kiriviri, caused widespread destruction, killing 19 people, including 9 children, despite Russia's claim that the strikes were aimed at military gatherings. The Ukrainian military dismissed these reports as false and called it another instance of Russian misinformation. Authorities in Kiriviri, including the region's governor, condemned the attack, emphasizing the pain of burying children, a sentiment echoed by many in the community. Meanwhile, a separate drone attack on an industrial facility in Russia's Volga River region added further tension to the ongoing conflict. While the specific facility was not named, local authorities confirmed the strike, which came amid escalating accusations from Russia that Ukraine had intensified attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Both nations continue to blame each other for violating agreements meant to prevent such strikes, highlighting the ever-deepening divisions in the war. The devastating attacks on Kryvyi and the ongoing cycle of violence between Ukraine and Russia reveals the profound human cost of this conflict. As both sides continue to accuse each other of violations, it is clear that the conflict's toll on human life continues to rise. This is Abdihamid Ali, GBS News.
The Israeli ministry has revived its initial account of the tragic shooting incident that claimed the lives of 15 emergency workers in southern Gaza on March 23rd. The military initially claimed that its soldiers had opened fire on vehicles that appeared suspicious due to lack of markings and lights. However, new evidence, including a video from one of the victims' mobile phones, has challenged this narrative, showing that the emergency workers were in clearly marked vehicles with their lights on when they came under fire. This new information has prompted calls for an independent inquiry from the United Nations and the Palestinians' Red Crescent. Abdihamid Ali has more on this report.
On March 23rd, 15 emergency responders, including paramedics and other medical personnel, were killed near Rafah in Gaza. These individuals were in marked ambulances and fire trucks when they were shot at by Israeli soldiers. The Israeli military initially justified the attack, stating that they opened fire on vehicles moving suspiciously without lights or markings in the dark. Recently, a mobile phone video published by the Palestinian Red Crescent showed a different scene. The workers were in uniform and driving marked vehicles with the emergency lights on. In the light of this evidence, the Israeli military has acknowledged that the initial report might have been inaccurate, though it continues to investigate the incident. The bodies of the victims were discovered a week later in a shallow grave, buried alongside their crushed vehicles, which had been pushed off by the road by an Israeli military vehicle. This new revelation has sparked demands for an independent investigation into the killings, as both the UN and the Palestinian Red Crescent seek justice for the victims.
Accountability should never require video evidence. It should not take a global outrage for the truth to be acknowledged.
This incident serves as a stark reminder of the need for greater protection of humanitarian workers and the importance of ensuring that they can carry out their duties without fear of violence. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
Thank you, Abdi, for that report. Now, North Korea hosted its first 31st Pyongyang International Marathon, marking the first since the COVID-19 pandemic. The event saw hundreds of runners, including 200 international participants, taking to the streets of the capital, Pyongyang, as part of the celebration for Kim Il-sung's birthday, with the country's borders largely closed. This race provided a rare opportunity for outsiders to experience life in North Korea. In the end, it was North Korean athletes who claimed victory, dominating both the men and women races.
North Korea hosted the 31st Pyongyang International Marathon, first since the COVID-19 pandemic. Hundreds of runners, including 200 foreigners, raced through the streets of Pyongyang. They were cheered on by the locals. The event, which is part of celebrations for North Korea founder Kim Il-sung's birthday, is North Korea's largest international sporting contest. With North Korea's borders largely closed, the marathon gave foreign participants a rare chance to visit. A Beijing-based tour company, one of the few allowed to operate in the country, brought in athletes from China, Romania, Morocco, and Ethiopia. North Korean runners took top honors, with Park Bum-dong winning the men's race in 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 11 seconds, while Jeon Sung-gyeong claimed the women's title with a time of 2 hours, 25 minutes, and 50 seconds. Elvin Muyodi, GBS News.
Congratulations to all athletes that won an award. Now, the ambassador will take a short break. We'll be back with more on the African In-Depth segment. Stay tuned.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent.
Kudiscover. Ulijuangaje like unaweza imba like yeah.
Kini Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wanani dis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafan jua ananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu mazee walishachoka na nikozabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya kalki.
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics? Yeah.
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing. And if you're tryna win, you can be on my team. Yeah, so I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who will you choose?
And the question of the day is, can you survive without internet?
Ngumu. Plus kuachilia hizo story tu zote zikupite ni ngori.
niwaambie ukweli. Like hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye alikuwa amezoea kushindana nguo, mwambie toa nguo ushinde uchi. Hiyo huku atriki kwa sababu sasa like ilikuwa imekuingia kwa kichwa kabisa.
Mimi nimesomea day school na niocha. So kukuwa na simu hadi ni ile katururu, si smartphone, ni ile katururu.
Sasa unaweza kaa holi ya bila simu.
Kuspend hii most of the time kwa simu. Also you need to run skills. So nilipata na place hapa nikapo-apply huko. And then I started learning skills. Digital skills.
Hadi siku mbili haiwezi. Kwa wiki naachilia hata kama ni siku mbili ama sometimes na extend to wiki mzima. Napata shiki simu yangu.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent au
Kudiscover. Ulijuangaje like unaweza imba like
Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wanani dis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafanjo ananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu mazee walishachoka, na niko zabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics?
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing. And if you're tryna win, you can be on my team. Yeah, so I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who would you choose?
And the question of the day is, can you survive without internet?
Ngumu. Plus kuachilia hizo story tu zote zikupite ni ngori. Niwaambie ukweli. Like hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye alikuwa amezoea kushindana nguo, mwambie toa nguo ushinde uchi. Hiyo huku atriki kwa sababu sasa like ilikuwa imekuingia kwa kichwa kabisa.
Mimi nimesomea day school na niocha. So kukuwa na simu hadi ni ile katururu, si smartphone, ni ile katururu.
Sasa unaweza kaa holi ya bila simu.
Kuspend hii most of the time kwa simu. Also you need to run skills. So nilipata na place hapa nikapo-apply huko. And then I started learning skills. Digital skills.
Hadi siku mbili haiwezi. Kwa wiki naachilia hata kama ni siku mbili ama sometimes na extend to wiki mzima. Napata shiki simu yangu.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to the bulletin, to the African in-depth segment. As promised earlier, we delve into one of the most pressing security challenges facing the African continent today, the rise of jihadist groups. Over the past decade, extremist organizations affiliated with Al-Qaeda, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and local insurgents have intensified their operation, spreading violence, instability, and displacements from the Sahel to the Horn of Africa. But first, let's take a listen to Paris Gigo report on the same.
أول مرة أدخل أرض العراق بدون جواز سفر.
Africa, a continent rich in history, culture, and promise, has become a battlefield, a place where terror, fear, and uncertainty take root in the hearts of its people. The rise of jihadist groups has shaken the very foundation of this vast and diverse land. From the Sahel region to the Horn of Africa, militants have left a trail of destruction that is difficult to comprehend. In the Sahel, the region encompassing Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, jihadist insurgencies have been growing ever more deadly. Al-Qaeda affiliates and the Islamic State local branches have expanded their reach, seizing towns, cutting off critical supply routes, and waging brutal attacks.
We can't trust anyone. We just hope we will never be attacked. They want Sharia law to be applied. That's what they are asking for. And that's why they took the gun, the Quran. They say they are not going to give up.
Burkina Faso have seen some of the most vicious assaults. In 2015, jihadist groups struck with impunity, leaving hundreds dead and thousands displaced.
I don't know how many people I have killed, because at the beginning, there were raids on villages and they shot people then. I was asked to slit their throats like sheep. I cut the throats of more than 20 of them. That's why I deserted.
Mali too has not been spared. Once a symbol of hope in West Africa, the country now finds itself trapped in a vicious cycle of violence. Jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS dominate much of the northern and central parts. In 2013, France intervened with Operation Savo to stem the insurgency. They were later joined by the United States in counter-terrorism operations, providing essential intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support. Their presence, while essential, was not enough to end the violence. And in 2022, France announced it would withdraw, leaving the region in a perilous state. Thousands of miles away in Mozambique, a similar tragedy unfolds. The insurgency in the northern region of Cabo Delgado has pushed nearly 1 million people from their homes.
Groups of men arrived with firearms and machetes and came to burn the cars. We were terrified, so we fled here.
This jihadist group, which began with local grievances, have now aligned themselves with global terror networks. Villages are razed to the ground, and countless civilians have become refugees, many of them living in squalid conditions in camps or wandering through the dense forest hunted by militants.
What we want is the war to end, so we can return to our villages.
In Nigeria, the war against Boko Haram and its offshoot, the Islamic State West Africa province, has claimed thousands of lives. Entire towns have been razed, and for years, the insurgents have terrorized the northeast of the country. Nigerian forces, bolstered by regional support, have fought valiantly to reclaim lost territories, but the extremist ideology of these groups remains a persistent threat. The role of foreign military intervention has been pivotal. The French army, alongside its European partners and the United States, has provided critical security in the region for nearly a decade. Their presence, though crucial in combating terror, has not been a permanent solution. The ultimate withdrawal of French forces from Mali and their decision to scale back operations in the Sahel have left a vacuum that jihadist groups are eager to fill.
So, thank you so much. And to debunk more on this, we are joined by our correspondent, Peris Kigo, and our expert in international relations, Dr. Josh Mayo. So today we are discussing about terrorism in Africa. First, Peris, welcome to the bulletin.
Thank you, Susan.
Can you tell me the main factors leading to terrorism in Africa?
Okay, thank you, Susan. Okay, when you look at the jihadist insurgents in Africa, especially the West Africa, it has caused a lot of chaos because every week, a week will not end without hearing cases of bombing. Maybe terrorist group, they have bombed a school, a hospital, or a village. And when you look at the reason why these jihadists, they are disrupting the nation, their main goal, it seems that they want to replace the government. They want to replace the government because they think the government is illegitimate. The government is corrupt. Why? Because they think that the government is aligning with the Western nations. And the Islam State, they don't like the Westernization. They actually they are against the Western culture. So they think that the government is betraying them because the government is aligning with the Western nations, especially education and the culture that the nations have borrowed from the Western nation. When you look at the Islamic, the jihadists, mostly they come from the Islamic State. And what they want to implement is the Sharia laws. But you wonder what kind of Sharia laws do they want to implement if these Sharia laws permit them to be killing. This Sharia law, they permit them to be abducting. Like the case that happened in Boko Haram in Nigeria in April 2014, where we had the Boko Haram abducted 279 schoolgirls. You see, so you wonder if they want to replace the government and they want to implement their Sharia laws, how is the nation going to run? Are these a kind of a group that can be entrusted with a nation, with what they are doing, abducting and killing? So it can never happen. That's one thing, it can never happen. They can never ever be given a position in the government. And they will never ever replace the government because their intentions is to implement the Sharia laws. But when you look at the Sharia laws, in fact, they don't follow those Sharia laws. The Sharia laws state the protection of human rights, the Sharia laws. It also states living a righteous life. But they're not living a righteous life. They are not living a righteous life because they are brutal in their activities when you look what they are doing. So even themselves, they are claiming they are going to implement the Sharia laws, but even themselves, they're not following those Sharia rules. So that's why we have this intense topic to discuss, and I know Dr. Josh is going to give us more on that.
Dr. Peris has raised a point that most terrorism is politically motivated. Do you agree with that?
To a large extent, yes. Many terrorist organizations have a political motive for carrying out their actions. These political motives are to institute or bring about what we call a theocracy. It's a government ruled by religious edict or religious principles, right? The current, a number of governments in the Middle East are theocracies. A very good example of a theocracy is Iran, which is ruled by the Ayatollah, right? Who is a supreme religious leader. Right? So this is the fundamental goal of many Islamic terrorist organizations. But not all terrorist organizations are Islamic. There are other terrorist organizations that use violence in order to achieve their political goals. Very close in Uganda, we have the Lord's Resistance Army. They are largely defeated now, but they were led by a notorious gentleman, maybe gentleman is not the right word to use, known as Joseph Kony. Joseph Kony led a rebellion in northern Uganda among the Acholi and the Teso people, starting from the 1980s when Museveni came to power through a rebel movement. And he set up the Lord's Resistance Army following the 10 Commandments, or at least he alleged to do that, in order to defeat the government of Museveni and take over power and govern according to the 10 Commandments. But what he did in northern Uganda, he carried out he perpetrated enormous and horrific human rights abuses, abduction of boys and girls, forcible recruitment into the Lord's Resistance Army, chopping off people's limbs, and actually forcing these young people to kill their own family members. So he used terror to try to recruit people into his movement and to scare the rest of society from supporting the government in order to support him. And Joseph Kony was the first person ever to be indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So terrorist organizations, yes, they use terror in order to achieve or to pursue political goals.
Thank you. Paris.
Yes.
How do the terrorists recruit? Because when you see most of them, they among them are also African terrorizing other Africans. How does the recruitment take place?
How they recruit other people? For me, I think maybe in terms, especially now if we take the case of Somalia, we can see even the reason why we have these children that are not going to school, they are recruited in the army by those terrorists. So they take advantages of the war. For me, I think when they attack their nations, that they are able to displace people. At the moment there is the displacement, so they have the chance to recruit those people, those young boys. So the way they recruit them and maybe take them to a particular place where they raise them and teach them how to shoot, because we can see that is the same case that is happening to Haiti, where you just find a very young boy, maybe even to 7 years old, he can hold a gun and shoot and kill. So you see, these jihadists or these terrorists, they recruit these young boys and train them. I don't know where they take them, because if actually the government were aware where they take them, they could have reached for them. But we don't know. I don't know if it's cave, somewhere like that, where they take and recruit those boys. But I know through the war, they recruit these boys and go and train them how to start attacking the nation.
So it's the African problems that make terror increase?
Not necessarily. We know that there have been terrorist attacks. September 11
yes.
In the US is one of the most recognizable terror attacks in the world. There have been terrorist bombings in Europe, in London, in Madrid, in the mid-2010s, in the underground, in the train network. We have had isolated terrorist attacks in Germany as well. So it is a global problem. Of course, we know that there have been mass terrorist movements in Iran, in Syria, and in other places, in Iraq particularly, not Iran. So it is a global phenomenon. Well, I think we need to understand that. The difference is that on the African continent, it takes a different format. In the West, they have what we call lone wolf attacks, individual persons carrying out terrorist attacks, maybe driving a car into a crowd or doing mass shootings, particularly in the US. We've seen these in Germany a lot, incidents of somebody driving a car into a crowd in a market or in a crowded place. In Africa, it is different because you actually have large groups of people forming a movement of fighters who then carry out terrorist organizations. So why is it that on the African continent and also parts of the Middle East, we have these large groups of terrorist organizations rather than individuals? So there's a specific feature of poor countries, right? Poorly performing economies. So there's a lot of grievances across a large section of the population. There's high levels of unemployment. There is societal division along ethnic lines, racial line, or religious lines. So people have, they identify, right? And these people are easily manipulated because terrorist organizations take advantage of already existing weaknesses in society. So I think that which exacerbates terrorist recruitment are weak societies. Weak societies are characterized by low levels of literacy, unemployment, disillusionment and frustration among young people, mostly young people, divisions in society, political grievances as well against the government, perceptions of inequality, that there are those who are getting rich and there are those who are increasingly getting poor, and so on and so forth. So all these factors, plus the weak presence of the state. Most African countries, they have a strong government at the center, near the capital and well-settled areas, but in the periphery, the farther you go away from the capital, you have less and less presence of the government. And you cannot have a vacuum in the state. A different power will occupy that place. And so these terrorist organizations exploit these weaknesses and the lack of the presence of the state to then easily recruit people. You have heard stories, they are jokes, but that they are serious. If you go to Turkana, for example, in Kenya, they ask you, how is Kenya?
Yes.
Right? The perception that they are not part of the state.
The state,
that they are, so when people are alienated from the government and from the state, it's very easy for them to be mobilized because they can easily identify with another player rather than the central government.
So what goes on in the mind of a terrorist before they decide to terrorize a country or a state? What goes on?
So we are now talking about the motivations.
Yes, motivation of it.
What is it that motivates people to join terrorist organizations?
Yes.
For the majority of particularly young people who join terrorist organizations, it is disillusionment, so lack of faith and lack of belief in the government, lack of hope that the existing systems can actually change their lives. Very often they have probably been victims of police violence, police brutality. So there is that grievance, there is that bitterness, and sometimes a sense of wanting to lash back, right? To revenge, right? So there are lots of these motivations. And sometimes they may not necessarily have personally been victims of state brutality or violence, but also perhaps their family members, right? And some of them could even be pursuing, they believe, a religious or a holy crusade, right? Because they have been, this is what we mean by radicalization, brainwashing, to believe that they are pursuing a holy crusade. They want to bring about a holy society governed by pure religious or spiritual laws. That is what Paris was talking about, the jihadists particularly, that they are pursuing jihad, a holy war, right? Jihad is a holy war, and it's a calling, believedly from Allah or from God. So they really believe spiritually that this is a holy cause they are pursuing,
so
and they have been blessed by Allah or God himself.
So Doctor, I have a question. Do you think the main agenda of the jihadists, or let's say, in fact, before I ask that, we know we have different religions. You know, we have Buddhism, we have Christianity, and we have Hinduism. But why Islamic State? Why is it the Islamic State that... No, I'm not trying to be a kind of... But I'm asking, why is it the Islamic State we have this kind of terror group?
That is a legitimate question. Why is it that religion is being used as a weapon to mobilize people to carry out terrorism?
Yeah, mostly in Islam.
And you're particularly asking about Islam. So we have different strands of Islam. I'm not an expert of Islam, I'm not a scholar of Islam, but the little that I have read is that you have different strands of Islam, and you have specifically what we call political Islam. There's a belief by the believers of this strand of Islam that the believers, the true believers, have a mission to first of all convert everyone in society into a Muslim, and that societies should be governed and ruled according to Islamic law. That is Sharia law, is Islamic law. And so when a religion has within its principles and its belief system that this religion, it's not just spiritual, but it should translate to a moral code, it should translate to a political system. So it motivates that a true Muslim should not just be satisfied with the spiritual, pursuing spiritual Islam, but this spiritualism should encompass all areas of your life, your economic system, your social system, your code, your legal code, but also the political system. So they believe that the true attainment, the true ultimate goal of Islam is to have a political system, not just in the countries where they control, but globally, that is governed by the laws of Sharia, which is Islamic law. And so this is the motivation for some of the believers of a certain strand of Islam to pursue and jihadism. Jihadism is a belief in converting others, and you don't just convert through persuasion. If they refuse, they're called infidels, they're non-believers. It is therefore justifiable in Islam to use violence to convert. That is why it's called jihad, a holy war. But Muslim scholars argue that that jihad begins with jihad is within yourself. You struggle within yourself to attain true holiness. It begins internally, and then there are some who argue that you can pursue jihad through peaceful means, that jihad does not necessarily mean violence. So there is disagreements even among Muslim scholars about how do we carry out jihad. Yes.
Doctor, even you have raised a very good question there. That is means struggle. In fact, jihad means struggle. Do you think do you think that the government, because they claim that the government is acting contrary, like government is betraying them, that's why they want to inside the country or maybe to replace the government, they think that government have aligned with the Western nations, so they think betray because government is not aligning with their Sharia version? Could that be the reason that they have been kept aside because the government is not aligning with the version of the Sharia law?
I think this is a very complicated topic because it's also part of human nature. It's not just about religion, because we see in other regions of the world, particularly South America, where we have these drug gangs, narco-terrorism, right? Narco-terrorism is a form of terrorism perpetrated by drug gangs or drug organizations and networks to control the state, right? So it is the nature of these organizations to use terrorism or violence to access power and to have control over the state and resources. So first of all, it's not just a function of a matter of religion, it's a matter of human nature to begin with, right? That human beings to some degree believe in the use of violence to attain power and control over others. We have also had in human history Christian terrorism. You have heard of the Crusades in Europe in the Middle Ages, where violence was carried out by groups of people who believed in a certain form of fundamental Christianity to pursue a holy political agenda in order to govern using violence. So I think it is only that in the recent, our contemporary times, we have seen political Islam carrying out political violence using terrorism. But if we go back in history, Christianity as well, if you look at the Old Testament, Israel, when they moved out of Egypt to the promised land of Canaan, they used violence. And some of the holy people in the Bible that we venerate, right? And we think they are the great leaders in Israel, used violence to achieve the promise of conquering and occupying the promised land. So I think it would be a misunderstanding to simply single out the use of violence as an inherently Islamic thing, that many religions have in the past used violence to attain political goals.
Terry, why do you think religion is mostly used?
I'm not a religious scholar, but because there's an element of faith. When you bring about the element of faith and destiny, you therefore make it like a calling from God, that it is part of your spiritual and moral obligation as a true believer to pursue the ultimate goal. And they believe that you're not just carrying out your own will, but you're using the will of God. You're following the will of God, and you have been blessed. And whatever you do in the name of God is not wrong. It's not evil. It is justified. And so this is the system of radicalization, right? That then it is easy for people to be brainwashed to believe that you're carrying out not just a mortal human objective, you're carrying the objective of the ultimate authority, which is supersedes every other authority on earth. And that is why it's easy to manipulate people using religion to carry out violence.
And doctor, why are the jihadists growing more strong every day? They are growing strong because we can see even the UN missions, they withdrew from the West Africa. Some they withdrew because of the interest violence in that nation. So what is making the jihadists to be more strong and very resilient when it comes to attacking, and like the government is like being defeated? What is making them to have that resilient spirit?
There are many factors to this. One, it is a growing population. Africa, particularly that region of West Africa, has one of the fastest growing populations in the world, also on the African continent. And so you have a large number of young people. The population is predominantly very young. Secondly, many of those economies are stagnating, meaning they are not growing, meaning they are not creating opportunities for employment and for people to realize a rewarding, meaningful life. And the other reason is political instability and weak governments, right? Underperforming economies, and also increased division among society, among the people. When you have scarcity of resources, you also have climate change, which is a factor that is making environmental resources that people would depend, they are diminishing. So when resources diminish, it intensifies conflict. And when conflict is intensified, one of the ways in which conflicting groups emerge is easily through this religious manipulation. And so it is a combination of all these factors. The very same reasons why you have coups, overthrows of governments, it is because the society is dissatisfied with the way things are being conducted. So those in the army express their dissatisfaction by carrying out coups. The society, who don't have at least the legitimate force of government, they also organize into militias. But we also have the collapse of Libya, particularly in North Africa. When there is state collapse, you have lawlessness. And you had many of the army members of the military of Libya fled southwards with huge arsenals of arms. So there is free availability, easily available arms, some of these also from the Middle East. So you have availability of arms, a growing population, weak governments, poorly performing economies, climate change. All these factors come together to increase, and that is why West Africa is responsible for about 70% of terrorist attacks on the African continent in the recent past. And with continued instability, we see a likelihood of this continuing.
For the parting shot, how is the media, do you think the media is portraying terrorism in Africa, especially the Western media? How is it portraying terrorism in Africa?
I would say that many of the young people on the African continent do not necessarily consume CNN or the New York Times or whatever.
Yes.
It is primarily social media. And it is the terrorist organizations themselves and some of their supporters who use social media to propagate their ideology, their beliefs, and to recruit. So I think in the past, we have blamed Western media for portraying Africa in a certain way, but I think the most potent and the most dangerous tool in the hands of terrorists to spread terrorism right now is social media.
Thank you so much, both Paris and Dr. for gracing this interview today. And that's all for today at The Ambassador. Thank you for joining us as we uncover the latest development. We'll bring you more updates of these stories and more as they unfold. Remember, this is The Ambassador, where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. I have been your Ambassador, Susan Nganga. Good afternoon.
Everywhere, GBS.